And this conversation today, it's a culmination of a year-long pilot project done in partnership with Land to Table and a network of farmers and the University of British Columbia, with a specific focus on increasing local food procurement at UBC's Okanagan campus in Kelowna, which I'll refer to as UBCO from now on. And this is the first in a series of what we're planning is 3 learning circles that will build to a final discussion in April, where we're talking about the systemic barriers and opportunities that impact institutional local food procurement. And this dialogue series, which is in addition to our pilot project, is funded through the Vancouver Foundation. So the focus of our conversation today, it's not about what we've accomplished over the last year through the pilot project at UBCO, but rather it's an opportunity to take the time to learn about the values and the approach to local food procurement by other institutions and organizations that support institutions. So we see this as an opportunity to draw folks in within our region into conversation through group learning. It's an opportunity to spark ideas about what's next for UBCO as we scale up our partnership efforts to increase local food procurement in this next year. And it's also an opportunity to spark connections and ideas for other institutions in our region and in the province, with the folks who've been able to join us today from across BC as well. So we will start today with a round of introductions from 5 guests, including 3 of our panelists from institutions or organizations representing institutions from across Canada and the US. And from there, we'll move into a Q&A session with our 3 panelists. And we'll pose 4 to 5 questions that we've created through our UBCO Pilot Advisory Committee. These are things that we want to learn more about from others. And after that, we'll take a really quick break and we'll say goodbye at that time to one of our panelists before we move into smaller breakout group discussions. And that'll be a really good opportunity to ask specific questions of each of our 2 panelists who remain, just to dive into deeper discussion about what they're doing and perhaps what others are doing in their institutions. And we're really fortunate to have a great group of folks here from a number of different institutions across BC. So I'm sure you also can offer insight into those conversations. And I'll provide more instructions once we get to that point. And then we'll close with a summary of what's standing out from our conversation and end with a group chatterfall, which I'll explain when we get there. Okay, so before we dive in, I just wanted to share a couple of rules of engagement. And that's just to frame our conversation today. So we're asking, I'll just put this in the chat as well. We're asking that folks listen and share with curiosity rather than judgment. Certainly do what you need to take care of yourself. We all spend a lot of time on Zoom in front of screens these days. So do what you need to. Step away, stretch, grab a drink, turn your camera off. And then the last point there is just make space, take space. And that's just to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share and ask questions, especially in the breakout rooms. Okay. Have I forgotten anything, team, or does anyone have any questions before we dive in? Awesome. Okay. So we'll start with some introductions from folks who are going to add context to our conversation here. We're going to begin with Gary Hartung and Aletha Boxkey. Did I say that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, great. And Gary is the Director of Food Services at UBC Okanagan, and he'll share a little bit about the pilot project and the work we've been doing over the last year. And Aletha is with the Feed BC initiative, which is a provincial initiative who's been a key funder of this pilot project and who are funding other institutions to increase local food procurement as well. And then we'll move into our 3 panelists. So why don't we start with you, Gary, and each will have about 4 to 5 minutes just to introduce themselves, organization, and the work.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. I will say that I did have your internet connection is unstable. So I don't know if that will only affect me seeing you or if I will break up. So I apologize in advance.
We can let you know.
So first, I kind of want to go backwards in time a bit to tell you how we got to where we are today. This campus is relatively young. It was established in 2005, and it is a sister campus of UBC in Vancouver, which is a little over 100 years old. And until 2019, food services was run by a third-party operator. So during this time period, the impact of food outside of dining locations has become much more prevalent just in society. It used to be really focused on that dining location, but what is food? And all the implications that it has and everything it touches became more important. So from that, a food vision and values was created to help filter decisions made on the campus through a core set of principles. Now, some of these are the role that food systems play in GHG emissions, being a stronger member of the community and not simply an organization that operates outside of it, and sustainability. So one of our core action items to help address these was to increase our procurement of local food. So now everyone hears about the importance of local food. We hear about it everywhere. It's almost become trendy, if you will. But why is it important to us? So we found it reduces the environmental impact, less packaging, warehousing, and travel. It helps support the local food producers and the local economy. The seasonality of food gives us variety. We can educate people on where their food comes from. It's not just a commodity, but the value of food. And just as important, if not more important, the food tastes better. So as a large purchaser in our area, wanting to increase local purchasing did create some challenges. Consistency of product, both in terms of quality and quantity, needing to purchase from multiple suppliers. We are a big organization that it can be time consuming, and lots of different people need to touch a process to order, to invoice, to get people set up, all of that. And then of course, working to find the multiple suppliers to source the product. So having to create multiple relationships, each having its own set of expectations, and those can be difficult to manage. So this brings us to land to table. So beginning with the previous chef at UBCO, a relationship was started with Liz and Mary, and the idea of working with land to table seemed like a perfect fit. And this is where communication really came in between land to table, the farmers working with them, and UBCO to figure out what that relationship and the process would look like. Now, like any good relationship, it takes all sides to make it strong, and the commitment of those involved has to be equal. So beginning the school year, we partnered with Shuswap Organics and Curlew Orchards through Land to Table. This year also presented some unique circumstances that made it difficult to forecast volumes. We opened a new dining hall and changed our residents' meal plan model to an all you care to eat. And the ongoing impact of COVID greatly reduced retail dining on campus and mostly shut down our catering. So we didn't have great numbers to necessarily share with the team. They were our best guess and estimates. But it was important to everyone that we started from a place of transparency and be open with the unknowns. And that's from both sides. So from the UBCO side of things, so the relationship has been strong, and the first year of the pilot project has been a success. We will achieve what our goals were, what our volumes were, which will be over 30,000 pounds of food. And this was really, it was important to everyone in the group to start, what I'll say, start small. We wanted to make sure that we started from a place of success, then look at who else can we bring in, what are our volumes, what are our needs, how can we support the local economy and those food producers better, and in turn, their understanding of what we needed is also increased. So another thing that we were able to do was use reusable delivery containers. So these were implemented that cut down on waste of how product is delivered to us. We are 6 months in now to the project, and like anything, there's always that worry in the back of your mind. Okay, is this going to work right? What happens if things go wrong? You know, all of those things. But the quality of the product has been fabulous. The infrastructure itself has worked flawlessly. Orders on time, and for those of you not in the BC area, in November, I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't a polar vortex. It was something to do with, you know,
atmospheric river.
Oh, thank you, Liz. Yes, some other great term. I want to be the person that makes up those terms someday. But where you know, we are situated in the mountains, but there are 3 main highways that reach us. So, you know, we should be good. Well, this atmospheric river ended up slamming it so hard that all 3 highways were closed for weeks, and a couple of them for months. So the damage was extreme. So yeah, actually having the relationships of local food producers, this was one of those situations where, you know, we're so used to and we see it with COVID now too, but we're so used to you know, our supply chain and how it's managed to the minute. And yet when things go wrong, they have a drastic, fast domino effect. And so really having those local relationships, you know, and it was an unintended advantage, of course, but it's something that shows that, you know, there's more than just the economic side and even sustainability side. There is value to how you do your business. So as we look forward and have 1 year under our belt now, we have a better idea of our new needs and our volumes. And we're working with the team to increase our food purchases going into the next year through Land to Table. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. That's a great summary. Aletha, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. Thanks. And thanks for the invitation to be here today. I'm Aletha Bonney with VBC, a provincial government program working to increase the use of BC food, BC grown and processed food in government facilities and beyond, to grow new opportunities for BC's agriculture and food sector, and also provincial food systems resilience. I'm joined here by a couple of my colleagues working with VBC, Christina Waters and Chashma Hines, and also Lindsay Benbow from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. And we're all here to learn more. We're constantly trying to improve our program and respond to the different needs of institutions. And also, you know, pleased to see participation here from a number of our partners that we're working with in post-secondary institutions and in healthcare as well. VBC is a 2020 Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries mandate commitment, following the success of our initial 2017 mandate commitment to initiate VBC. So over the last 3-4 years, we've been advancing comprehensive efforts to grow partnerships and programs to increase BC food in hospitals, residential care facilities, public post-secondary institutions, K-12, corrections, and other government supported facilities and programs. And I'm not going to speak sort of too long because I know we have lots on the agenda today, but I just wanted to speak to our core strategies and underpin our work, which is working with public sector awareness to build awareness and demand for BC food and beverages. And we do that through strategic partnerships and alliances, programs and supports that really focus on some of the components around tracking BC food expenditures, sourcing more BC food, market intelligence work. And we have a partner program that supports, that includes basically what we call our FEBC standards and definitions for BC food product, and has a minimum target in there for 30% that we encourage our institutions to work towards over time, recognizing that many of those, and certainly I'm sure UBC and UBCO are aspiring to go further than that as well as some of our other partners. We also, so that's sort of our key strategy in terms of building demand. We're also growing the sector, and that's building capacity and supporting market readiness of our producers and processors across BC, and you know, some alignment with some of the work that Land to Table does in that North Okanagan region. But we developed new and expanded programs, business training on things like food safety and how to be ready for institutions market, and special events that help to build opportunities for our sector. We have a series of pitch and plate that we do with our institutions, which basically invite and coach BC-based companies to be able to pitch their products to post-secondary institutions that are looking for more local food. Our third sort of core strategy is around growing product value chains, technology, and innovation. And that's the work that Cheshma Hines, who I believe is also on the call, helps to support. And that's a whole team and a new service here at the ministry, which is really about problem solving and really connecting institutions with BC food producers and processors, and doing the matchmaking that's involved in helping to facilitate these opportunities. And then our last core strategy is certainly not the last, but a critical to all the work that we do, is around tracking, measuring, and reporting on demonstrating progress across all of the streams in which we work in, as well as our core objectives. And we continue to work with all of our institutional partners to really be able to elevate the work that many of them are doing, and in different ways, because there's some really exciting outcomes that are starting to form as a result of our FBC work that is really beyond just local food procurement, but is really shifting into what I would consider like food systems transformation, where we have this integration of institutions involved in helping to support our food and agriculture sector to grow and evolve together. So I think I'll just stop there. We have lots more information on our FBC website that showcases some of our other partners across healthcare, post-secondary institutions, and beyond, as well as a number of our food supply chain partners and distributors that are working alongside of our institutions and working closely with us to make sure that all of these different components along that whole value chain help to facilitate more BC food products in different ways. So thank you all for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to the session today. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Aletha. I think there will probably be good tidbits that are that you can share with us, especially during those breakout sessions. So yeah, thanks for being here. We'll move into our panelist introductions. I'm going to start with Hannah Weinronk, and Hannah's joining us from Boston, I believe. And you're the director of programs at the Real Food Generation in Boston. So we'll let you introduce yourself, 4 to 5 minutes, and then we'll follow with Vijay and Makayla. Thanks, Hannah.
Turned off my video instead of unmuting myself. Hi, everyone. Really wonderful to be here with you all. My name is Hannah. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the director of programs at Real Food Generation. I'm based here in the Boston area on traditional Massachusetts land. And I wanted to just share a little bit about some of the initiatives that have been moving on campuses in the US in the past couple of years, and hope that might have some insight for what you all are building in Canada. So the Real Food Generation supports 2 initiatives, the Real Food Challenge and Uprooted and Rising. And the Real Food Challenge was launched in 2008, primarily by student organizers who were looking around at all of the efforts that were happening on campus around local food, campus gardens, farm worker solidarity, fair trade, cage-free, animal welfare, climate, and seeing all of this energy, and these group of students started to explore how that could be leveraged collectively, and how those siloed issues could get in conversation with each other, and in connection and conversation with sustainability experts and people in dining, learned that universities spend in the US collectively $5 billion every year on food. And so they had this vision that if that resource could be directed to farms and food businesses that reflect values around supporting the local economy and protecting workers' rights and ecological sustainability and animal welfare, then that could be a huge investment in the kind of food system we need, and a shift away from the industrial corporate food system that so many of our institutions are tied to. And so they created a set of standards for defining real food on campus, a set of criteria and certifications that they could look to actually get behind some of the claims that institutions were making, and be able to bring transparency to what was being purchased on campus, and actually give institutions tools and resources to be able to say, to be able to set goals and benchmarks, and measure progress, and really know how to make those tough decisions between, 15 different certifications being thrown your way, which ones of them are legitimate and actually mean real impact. And so they created these real food standards to define real food on campus, a tool called the Real Food Calculator to actually audit university food purchasing. Students would conduct audits of what was brought in to look at what kind of real food was coming into the campus, and organized campaigns for their institutions to make commitments to real food and really see those shifts through. And so happy to share more on what all of that looks like later, but over the past 10 years or so, more than 80 universities across the country have made these commitments to real food. We've seen more than $80 million committed to real food and moving into the hands of farms and food businesses that are local and ethical and sustainable in different ways. And we've also run into many challenges in that process, which I'm happy to share more about as we get deeper. But glad to be here with you all.
Yeah, thanks so much, Hannah. We're really happy to have you, and that's a really great context for jumping into the questions in a moment. Thanks so much. Vijay, perhaps you can introduce yourself and your work, your program.
Hi, my name is Vijay. I'm the executive chef for hospitality services at the University of Guelph. The hospitality services has been a department of the university for the last 40 years. We are about an hour and a half away from Toronto. It's a mid-sized university, very much focused. There are 8 colleges in the university. 2 of them are really predominant, if you may, the Ontario Veterinary College and the Ontario Agricultural College. We have 6 more colleges. We are in a predominantly agricultural area called Wellington County, just west of Toronto. Our operations in a typical year is, we do about $35 million in food a year. We have 22 outlets, 4,500 students in residence, anywhere from 12 to 15,000 in and out of campus, about 4,000 employees. Us being an agricultural university, there are a lot of other smaller remote campuses all across Ontario as well for research stations. So having said all that, we do anywhere from 15,000 meals on average every day. We have about 200 to 250, the numbers have changed, but we are close to 250 unionized full-time staff or temporary full-time staff, plus about 400 part-time employees. And typically in a good year, when we are busy, we have about 600 students working for us. So it's close to 1,000 employees during regular operations. And that is, much of it is usually from August till the end of April. Maybe switch on to our conference mode. We are very, very hectic, except for maybe a couple of weeks in July. We do anywhere from 2,800 to 3,000 events on campus through the year. So quite a hectic operation. From the kitchen, we have, I had, 2 years back, I had about 35 cooks, 12 apprentices, and well over 100 people who work in all the kitchens. We have 6 operational kitchens, but COVID's put a big damper on all that. It's changed completely. In the last, we did operate right through. We had about 800 students during COVID. In the first year, we started where we had about 3,800 students starting the fall of 2021. And we have kind of maintained it relatively at the same, as I was talking before, when we started operations in January, and when more of the students have started to come back last week. Having said that, we handle enormous volumes of food. Since 2011, 2012, there's always been a good focus on local food at Guelph. But in the last 10 years, we put on a lot of efforts to really change our menus, rework how we operate, kind of to accommodate as much food that we can purchase locally and source from Ontario. Again, we are, I'm not very sure of BC, but here, I think after October, there's not much produce here in Ontario. It gets pretty cold. And, you know, the first produce starts coming in maybe May or end of May. That's when we start getting our asparagus and fiddleheads and stuff like that. So there are, you know, it's a good long 6 to 7 months that, you know, we kind of pretty much rely a lot on stuff coming across the border. But we, you know, right till January, February, we still have a lot of hard vegetables available that, you know, that we source from a local produce auction. Overall, I'm just going to talk about produce. If I can do that. We do about 35% of produce in season locally. So overall, we are at about, you know, 380 tons of vegetables that we source from a supplier, and of that 35% comes from local farms. And on top of that, we buy a lot of stuff from local auctions and stuff like that. That's close to about 120 tons of vegetables. That is just produce. And then we then there's quite a bit of other things that we buy locally from within Ontario. Again, our classification has changed over the period of years. And I mean, when you say local, you know, it could be county, it could be, you know, from the province of Ontario, just because of what is available, and how much we can accommodate into our menus and stuff like that, and into the whole logistics and the whole idea of this local food and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's kind of that's in a nutshell. The last couple of years has been like David or anybody else would know, it's been extremely difficult. We really hope, you know, we are in a very good run till 2018, 2019, and you know, when things stop, it's been pretty hard for us operationally. I really hope, you know, not just food, you know, we don't have customers, and that really puts a damper on everything. So everything's taken a step back. And we really hope in the next few months we can at least get to, you know, 70% or 80% of what we were about 2 years back. That is the hope. So, and again, you know, it's like the rest of the industry, we have lost, and I think we did pretty well because we had spent a lot of time on our cooks for 7 or 8 years to get them trained. We've lost, like almost everybody else, about 30% of really good trained cooks. So it is kind of starting from scratch again. So it's going to be a hard few years to get back to where we are.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, that I haven't heard that piece in terms of COVID impact. Yeah, that's tricky. Thanks, Vijay. I think we'll dive into more of those details in a moment. Yeah. And Makayla Bonney is our third panelist, joining us from Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, where you also have snow today, apparently.
Yes. I hope that my voice isn't glitchy and that I'm able to stay with you. I lost internet a moment ago. We've had an ice storm recently. Thank you for inviting me today. I do have a couple slides just to visually show where Indiana is, if Liz or Kelly don't mind allowing me to share my screen.
Yeah, let me just do that. Kelly, is that, can you do that? Or do I have to do that? Sorry, I can't.
I think both of us can, but
we'll see if you can do that.
Yeah,
faster. It'll be faster.
So my name is Makayla Bonney. I'm the Director of Sustainability at Indiana University, located in the Midwest. We are a large campus. We have about 40,000 students enrolled, 11,000 of which are residential students on campus. We spend for a resident, oh, here we are at the shared screen now.
Perfect, yeah.
Okay, good. So here we are located in Indiana, in the Midwestern United States. Indiana is a rural state, as are our neighbors. Not necessarily sustainable agriculture, however. Our largest agricultural exports are row crops, so corn, soybeans, pumpkins. There's a lot of pumpkins in the Midwest, tomatoes, believe it or not, and poultry, although unfortunately most of that poultry is
Whoops. Makayla, I don't know if you can hear us. I think we may have lost you. Hopefully momentarily.
Maybe if the video's off, it might help.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can hear us, Makayla, maybe try turning your video off. We may have lost her altogether.
That's unfortunate. I didn't hear on the news about that big ice storm.
Did you?
Yeah, in
Right.
the States.
Okay.
Major one. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Oh. Yeah. Just give it one more second here.
I
and
think
see.
she's just dropped out, hasn't she?
Dropped out.
I'll let
altogether.
her back in as she rejoins us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and maybe ask her to have the video off, and she can try the slides, but maybe the video off.
Well, why don't we move into our questions then? And when she pops back in, we'll go back to Makayla. Yeah, if she can pop back in, we'll see how we go. That's too bad.
Email.
So the next session that we were going to dive into with our panelists. Oh, there we go. We lost you there for a second, Makayla. I wonder if you want to turn your video off. Do you think that would help?
yeah, I can try that.
Let's see how we go. And
Can
do you,
okay?
yeah. Oh. Do you want to try one more time, popping your slides back up? Yeah, there we go.
Can you all hear me okay now?
We can, yeah.
Okay, good deal. All right, so as I think I was saying, we're based here in the Midwest. We are an agricultural state, not necessarily sustainable agriculture or small scale producers. Indiana University is a large campus. We have 40,000 students, 11,000 on site, and our annual residential student food expenditure is about $17 million. Sustain IU, the Office of Sustainability, together with IU Dining, has been tracking sustainable food spend for the last 6 years. This has really been a grassroots effort on our campus. It has become increasingly popular with administrators, although we do have a new provost and a new president at our university, so we will see where their priorities lie. But this has really been a bottom-up effort to diversify our food spend and increase healthy food attributes, equitable, ethical, and sustainable. To do that, we have used the Real Food Challenge. This is not the official Real Food logo. This is one that we've developed in-house. So as Hannah outlined, Real Food is looking at many different attributes, primarily those that are environmentally sound, so often certified organic, certified humane, fair trade, or local, and that's local and community-based. So this is small scale producers within the state that are selling less than $500,000 per year. The Real Food Challenge, which we really like, also looks at disqualifying ingredients. And so this is really getting at health attributes of food or negative indicators within the food system. So this would include genetically modified ingredients, confined animal feeding operations, artificial dyes, things of that nature that are connected to known health issues. So the last few years, Real Food at IU has been steadily increasing. Unfortunately, I don't have our fiscal year 21 numbers ready at this time. We have students and analysts from Real Food who track this. So it's students here on campus that are assessing our spend each year. Each year, that assessment takes a little bit less time and we become more efficient, but it is still an incredibly daunting task to go through our food data each year, but you can see that it is increasing. So the most recent data that I have from 2020, 13% of our food expenditures at IU would be considered real food. However, because we're a public institution, our administrators really appreciate the story, and our students appreciate the story of our commitment to organic and commitment to local, commitment to humane. But because we are a public institution, our external constituents, perhaps they care less about what is organic and they want to know what money is going back within the state of Indiana. So we also use a tracking method from a nonprofit within the state called Indiana Grown to examine all of the food that IU is purchasing that is produced, packaged, grown, distributed within Indiana. And that percentage is quite higher, that's 18%. So that would be, for example, poultry that's originating within the state, but it's not, or it's not small scale. We are not an agricultural school. We do not have a school of agriculture. We don't have students studying sustainable agriculture, but 3 years ago, we did launch a campus farm. So this is a farmstead that is just about a half a mile from campus. And through a grant from the Office of Sustainability and the Office of the Provost, we have been transforming this space back into a farm. So back into what it was 50, 60 years ago. It was a family farm. It's required intensive soil management, but it's been a really wonderful space for students to visit, to volunteer, and 10% of this food is donated to local food pantries, and the remainder is sold back to the university. We are really keen for this space to not interfere or compete with local produce farmers. We have a very vibrant produce farming community in Southern Indiana. So we also use this as a learning and teaching space for farmers and a collaboration space, and we do not sell on the open market. We only sell back to the campus at prices that are competitive with our regional small farm economy. One of the ways that we advertise these efforts to students, because so much of this work is being done behind the scenes. Students eat a burger or they eat stir fry and they don't necessarily know that the produce or the meat is coming from the region. So we host an event called Big Red Eats Green annually. Big Red is another name for our mascot. We are the Hoosiers, which is one of those it's just a made up mascot. So each fall when the weather is nice, we have a sustainable food fair for our students. We bring in local vendors. Each of the vendors has to align with one of those real food attributes. So either local and community based, certified humane, or certified fair trade, or organic. So we bring vendors onto campus and we simultaneously sell at food trucks or pop-up outdoor grills that our IU dining folks operate. We sell those same items within that dish so that students are able to meet their farmer, meet their grower, meet their rancher, and also sample that food. Our hope is that they then go back into the dining halls, recognize that dish, and purchase it.
I think we maybe have lost you again, Makayla. I think, yeah. This is all really great detail. I'm frantically writing notes because yeah, are you kidding? I keep like, these are all things that we're starting to talk about with UBCO and how to engage students. So with that, I wonder actually if we should maybe just jump right into the questions. I wonder if, can we stop that screen sharing? Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, why don't we jump into questions, and Makayla can hopefully come back and share a little bit more. So this suite of questions was created through our UBCO Pilot Advisory Committee. And these are based on things that we want to learn more about as we move into next steps. And each of you has kind of touched on some of these pieces that we're going to ask you directly about. So we'll spend the next 20 minutes or so with Vijay, Hannah, and Makayla, if we can get her back. And invite you to, this doesn't have to be super rigid. Like if one of you responds and then the others go and you think of something else, please chime back in. The idea here is to just dig a little deeper into the details. And if questions are popping up for our participants here, please put them in the chat and or jot them down to take into the breakout group discussion as well. Okay, so the question that I wanted to start with, and some of you have touched on this a little bit, is what is the relationship, and I'll put this in the chat as well, what is the relationship between the local food provider and your institution, or maybe it's local food providers and institution, and how do you facilitate or maintain these relationships? And Hannah, I know this question might need to be framed a little bit differently for you because you are working with different institutions. So I'll pop that into the chat here, but I guess another way to say that is, what is the model for procurement that you're using? Are you simply purchasing from farmers, or is there more collaboration involved? Is it more complex? Let me make sure. So I'll pop that in the chat, and whoever wants to start, there's the question. Feel free to jump in, Vijay or Hannah. Yeah, what is the relationship, or what are some examples of relationships between local food providers and institutions?
Yeah, can I go ahead?
Please, yes.
Okay, yeah. At Guelph, we and like some of the other institutions might have, I don't think we have a very set principle or set standard of full list of people that you buy from, and this is what you buy from certain farmers, and this is what you would buy from another person. We don't have a set principle or set guideline, as if you may. What we've done over the years, I think what we've done well is to cultivate some good relationships and good partnerships with a lot of different people. Every week during the growing season and even during the winter till produce is available. Like I said, we are in a growing region. It's called Wellington County. One of the sous chefs goes to Elmira produce auction. It's a Mennonite auction. Depending on the day that they have the auction, we go over there, and again, it's an auction, so we don't know what's available. But we kind of have a fairly good, idea. Depending on the growing season, we know what's going to be available every week, and we kind of check in with a few farmers. The sous chef will go in there, look at what's available, and again, there might be times when we get cauliflower for 50 cents or cauliflower for $1.25. It all depends on what's available, and every week we usually buy 3 to 5 pallets of food, depending on whatever is available. So there are about 75 produce farmers at this auction. So the sous chef or our purchasing person and me, we have built some good connections with a lot of different farmers, and they would usually come to us and say, if you regularly buy certain things from the auction, they would come up to us and say, hey, instead of going through the auction, how about I give you a couple of skits there, a couple of skits of, you have 1,000 heads of cauliflower coming in next week. Are you willing to buy? Or, we have 3 bins of peppers to go through, and are you willing to? So we've kind of built those things up with a lot of the farmers in and around. So we built our kitchen system in a way that we buy whatever is available, best in season and good price, get it in, and kind of rework the menu the other way, if you may. So a lot of places, I think there's a menu set, and then we go looking for stuff to fill into the menu. So we've done we've kind of trained our people, and I'm kind of a little all over the place, but I'm just we've kind of reworked the menu according to what we get in season, if you may. So that's kind of what I said before, that from 2011, 2012, we put in a lot of effort to train our staff and our managers to be really flexible with the menus. We have a base menu set up for 17 days or 21 days or whatever, but it's just a base to work out of. But we've always tweaked the menus, and we kind of trained our students and our university staff and all of them who go look at menus that, hey, menus will change based on what's available or what the chefs procured procured from the auction, or when what the farmers dropped off. So that's been a lot of work, and and like I said, it's not very principled here for us, or it's not set in stone at this is what the menus are going to be, or this is the way it's going to work. But we kind of reworked in a way that we train a group to be very flexible, that hey, today the organic garden farmer would say, I got 4 bins of this and 4 bins of kale and this and all this coming in. I just harvested them today morning, so we send our drivers pick it up in the afternoon. We incorporate that in the menus the next couple of days, and so it's I think we have trained ourselves to be flexible, to be as adaptable to what is available out there. So
that was my thought, is you must have to be pretty flexible with that model. And that, I wonder, that sounds like it's probably quite unique to your area. Hannah? Yeah.
Sorry. So I think like I said, it took a few, and it was a big change for our system as well, in the early 2012, 2013, when we really started getting all these things, and our cooks as well, because they all like to work 5 days ahead, 6 days ahead. The menus are, and this is what I prep, is all set up, the carts are ready. And to change that thinking into, hey, I'm done at 2:30. I'm sure David can relate to what I'm talking about. Now I'm done at 2:30, my prep needs to be done. I got to have my vegetables by 7 in the morning when I'm here. Things don't happen, the farm, like I said, we have an organic farm on campus. It's a small farm, so I work very closely with the farmer, and it all depends on how many volunteers he has, or how many students show up at his farm in the morning at 9 o'clock and say, I got to harvest this. It's pretty hard for the next couple of days. I'm going to harvest all these greens today, and it's going to come up to you. And they usually call by 12 and say, hey, 12 at noon, and say, I got this, can you take it? And we've and over the years, like I said, we made it very flexible, and said, yeah, no problem. And then the drivers will pick it up. It comes to us at 4 o'clock, and then 2 days later, the menus change. So it's more work in the back of the hand for marketing to change all the menu signs, and for the managers to change the pricing. So it's quite a bit of work in the back end, and especially in terms of organizing. But we've kind of trained ourselves to do that. The cooks appreciate it. Our students, I think it was a big sell during our meetings with the students, and I think they're really, I think we've done a lot of tours in the kitchen. Lots of students have come and seen what we do. I think over a period of years, I think they have kind of really, really appreciate the efforts that we have put in. And we've kind of taken students to the farm as well, and to the auction as well, and kind of show them what really happens in the back end. So that's kind of worked well for us. It is a lot of work, considering working from a template and ordering from Cisco DF is really easy, but if you really turn it around, it's a lot more work on the chefs and to get it organized and change the menus, the quantities. But it's been working. So
yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for explaining that. And I think we did lose Makayla probably for good here. Hey, yeah, okay, that's okay. Ice storms, what are you gonna do? Hannah, why don't we go to you? And I know that you're not in one institution, but I wonder if there's some examples that are coming to mind of relationships and setups that you want to share.
Yeah.
Oh, Mary, yeah.
Oh, I just want to say that Makayla sent an email, and she just said to everyone, sorry, apologies, but because of the ice storm, she's just not connecting well today.
Yeah.
It's actually a snow day, and her kids are all at home, and she's at home.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, she just said she'd be happy to answer questions by email, and I'll share her email, and we might arrange an interview with her later.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Mary.
That's great. Well, first want to say, Vijay, thank you for everything you just shared. I think that level of flexibility and adaptability has been really key to seeing success in local food and real food efforts in the US. And it's been a particular challenge when an institution thinks that they can just like take local food and swap it for what they had before at the exact same price point with the exact same menus with the exact same type of operation, or when there are external third-party food service management companies who are running the dining, setting the menus nationally, and even when the chefs know that that's not the way it's going to work, they don't have too much choice around it. So just want to really appreciate the work that you've done to really shift the operation and how it all works, to be oriented around how the local food system works. I think in the institutions that I've connected to, everyone does it differently when it comes to sourcing local food. Some universities are forming direct relationships with specific farms and farmers. And so they are, in setting up direct purchasing relationships. And sometimes those are just about buying and selling, and sometimes there are deep partnerships that build where students will go to the farms or where the farmers will come to campus. A lot of universities end up forming relationships with food hubs and other aggregators who are able to bring together produce from many smaller farms, aggregate it, maybe do some processing, and be the one to also handle the institution and their needs, and also support farmers to meet whatever food safety requirements they need, or other requirements they need to meet that they might not be able to do on their own, and also to be able to get the kind of scale that an institution needs while still working with small farms and producers. And some institutions choose to kind of source local food through their existing distribution channels. So some of the major broadline distributors, even in the US, have built out local food programs. So they might be working with the produce division of a Fresh Point, of Performance Food Group, or of Cisco, and source local food through them. But in that case, there's a lot less transparency about they often don't even know which farms they're working with or sourcing from, and they really don't have that relationship. Students don't have that relationship, farmers don't have that relationship as much. So yeah, I think those are like the three primary models we've seen: is direct sourcing, food hubs and aggregators, and distributors. And we've actually seen cases where food hubs have come into existence in order to aggregate from small producers and sell to institutions based on commitments that institutions have made to sourcing from local farmers. So yeah, those are some of the models that I've shown up here.
Yeah, those are really great examples. I think we've got Emily Dubinville with us today. Her and her partner Owen are acting as that aggregator this past year, taking from small scale farms to get one order, one delivery to UBCO. Yeah, and that's something that has to be grown carefully, I think, and we've heard about that through different hubs. Yeah, thank you for that. That's great. One of the other conversations that our advisory committee has had over the last year, and this has been touched on, and it's a shame Makayla's gone because she was really touching on these points as well, is with regard to the values that guide local food purchasing beyond just local as geographic proximity to campus. So the values that make us really want to invest and allow for increased buy-in from campus community. So I was wondering, the question is, when procuring local food, what values do you see or use to guide your purchasing, like environmental sustainability, like social justice or animal welfare? And then how do institutions check or affirm that those values are represented, especially when bringing new vendors on board? So I'll post that question in the chat as well. this is something that we're looking to explore further in this next year through the pilot project at UBCO. Oops.
That's a great question. Maybe I can kick this one off.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so as it's great to have been on this call with Makayla, who's actually implementing the Real Food Challenge efforts at in Indiana. So yeah, we look at 4 values primarily, whether food products are local and community-based, ecologically sound, humane, and fair, looking at workers in the food supply chain. And we go through a process of revising and updating those standards every couple of years because new certifications emerge and new efforts emerge, and the conversation shifts around sourcing. And so we're actually right now in the midst of going through a big revision of our how we define real food to much more deeply incorporate racial justice, sourcing from Black and Indigenous and POC farmers, and workers' rights, and making sure that we're uplifting places that workers are organizing, from the farm to the process, like distribution centers to the institutions, and also integrating efforts around climate justice much more deeply. So those are some of the values that are coming into to how we encourage institutions to guide their purchasing. And then, as Makayla mentioned, they actually do full reviews of the invoices of the purchasing data, and rate every food product on those standards, and then come out with a report that is able to look year to year at how their sourcing has lined up on those different values. They often have, our tool in particular is a student-run tool, so they'll often employ students on campus, also as an opportunity for students to work and to learn, to conduct those audits and really be exploring the campus food supply chain, connecting directly with farmers, and learning about those different values and issues. And once an institution has made a commitment to integrating these values around real food into their dining program, they will often put that into RFPs that they put out for new contracts, and will communicate directly with distributors who they start working with that these are the values that they're prioritizing, and that anybody who's sourcing to them needs to be able to meet those values, or they'll get in conversation with the farms and businesses that they purchase from. And we've actually seen cases where they've encouraged and supported a local farm to get an organic certification in order to meet those standards, or a local bakery to start using and incorporating local ingredients. And so we've started to see some of those shifts. And I'm going to drop into the chat 2 resources. One is our Real Food Calculator website. And so if you open that and navigate around it, there's an explanation of how that, what the standards are, how that auditing tool works, and the institutions that are using it in the US right now. And then the other link that I'll just drop in is a report we put out a couple of years ago, highlighting a number of different examples and case studies of relationships between institutions and local and real food vendors, farms and businesses, kind of how those relationships were formed, and what they have meant, what the impact has been for folks in different parts of the food supply chain.
Awesome. Thanks so much. That's great. We'll include those links in our notes too that are shared back so that folks have access to them. And I think what you're speaking to is really transforming food systems, which is what Aletha spoke to at the beginning. Like, it really is holistic and all-encompassing in the ways that you're encouraging and including those values. And that's really exciting. We may be in touch further about that actually as we do some more research into that. Vijay, I want to make sure to give you the chance to chime in there. Yeah.
Yeah, in spite of all the efforts that we have put into sustainable sourcing and all that, and like I talked to Ty when he spoke to me last year with this interview, and just before when we met, we barely scratched the surface with what we really need to do and what we really need to achieve over the years. Like Hannah mentioned, we are nowhere close to incorporating all those ideas into our sourcing. I know much of ours is geographical, and the only good thing for us is that it's a much smaller county, and the relationships that we have with most of the farmers that we source from are very small farmers. Lots of them we know, they are, and that is why I think we talked about the flexibility of it. Yeah, we get some lamb and beef from, I'm just sharing another example. They're called Thatcher Farm. She just has a few heads of cattle and some lamb, and then, it's a constant process. And then the way we've incorporated there, and which is probably 3 times more expensive than what I would buy out of a distributor. So what we've done is, so we have our flagship dining, residence dining places called Procurement Hall, and we have certain stations that we can afford to charge students a little bit more for the value of the product that we get in. So we kind of, most of that has been, a lot of our relationships have been with much smaller farmers. So we really we've not touched on social justice and the rest of it. But we do know, because it's small farmer and we've constantly read and hear stories and we talk to them, that they're very conscious about animal welfare, or conscious about what they practice and conscious about what they do. So it is more with what we trust that they do the right thing. The last couple of years, though, because we are in the Golden Horseshoe in Ontario, we have started working we always used to, but there's been some more push with about 6 other universities in Ontario. So it's McMaster University, Waterloo, University of Toronto, Western, Windsor. There are 6 or 7 who work together, and the chefs have gotten together to put in some specs and standards in place and go back to, and again, much of it based on what can be sourced from Ontario or as close to our universities as possible. So the 6 or 7 universities together, it's tremendous buying power, close to well over $60 to $70 million in food purchases, right? So the process is on. The steps are, we've taken some steps, but it is a work in progress. There are some chefs who have visited some of these farms and some of these processes to kind of really gauge what's going on. But I think with COVID last year and with a lot of uncertainties, we have not really made much progress on those levels. So.
Yeah, that's fair. I think everything is shifting too with COVID, and now these climate extremes. People are just looking at things a little bit differently, and we maybe haven't had the time to really dive into it. The last 2 years have been all consuming for sure. And you talked a little bit about cost there in terms of how you were sourcing, who you're sourcing from, and where that product goes. So that and that's a good segue into the next question, which is, the $1 million question. And I'll post that in the chat, which is, how does your institution or those who you're working with balance the higher costs of quality local food with the challenge of student and staffing budgets? That's, sorry for the dinging there. Yeah.
I can go.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I think that's a question that's quite often asked. We, like I said before, we've been. I think it all goes back to the way we've run our operation, if you may. I think we've made quite a few subtle changes. I think it's a lot of it has to do with menu mix at the end of the day. I'm sure all the chefs and F&B directors know how to manage cost. There, I think good examples. For example, at Thatcher Farm, lambs costs 3 times more than the regular lamb, but that is something that we incorporate in a special that can be quite high price. So the meat in that meal is probably quite expensive, but the rest of the accompaniments that go on the meal can be adjusted and modified in such a way that they are the overall cost of the meal is still at the ballpark figure of where we want it to be. The meat might be 3 times more pricey, but the starches and the rest of the vegetables that go in the plate was something that we acquired in an auction, which was, like I said, there are times when we get 20 pounds of potatoes for $2, right? So that's from an auction. So we would buy 50 cases of those. So that kind of really offsets the price of the meat. It's the same with, like I said, with cauliflower or certain things that we buy when we buy it in season. It's really, really cheap. And I know, and we're really not, I've never tried to bargain with a farmer on what the price is. There are times when, when I buy a bin of it, and he's usually coming at the best price that he can get, and which is reasonable for him as well. And so you get it in, process it, and use it up in the best way we can. And like I said, I think if the menu makes us right, there is really not much of a problem to manage costs. Again, going back to the operations, if the menu makes us right, much of our food on campus is produced in-house, and then, so there's a lot of mix and match of ingredients. If I'm processing peppers and one, and I'm sure all the chefs do the same thing. It gets used, same ingredient can be used in 3 or 4 different things in it. So that's really hard, and it's all about managing waste, making sure the menu mix is right, and producing quantities right. So it is very much good for most of the products. But yeah, we're not going to touch on things like ribeyes and short ribs and all that. So that's really not possible. Though we do that on our menus on our special stations, or when we have catered events and stuff like that, we can use all those. So we do get, when we get premium price, there's no problem using a premium product. But for features and all that, I think it all comes down to menu mix and the amount of the low value, high profit items that we get. If that's way higher than, and we can promote a certain certain item that we get locally that's a high cost, and we don't sell much of it, it really balances out. And we also have a pay-by-weight system on campus in one of our main residence dining unit. So it's like using, like I said, the chefs. I think all the chefs know how to manage it, right? Use bone-in cuts, use cheaper cuts, and it's more starches, mixing 50% of vegetables into all your meals and stuff like that. So it is very much possible if you manage a kitchen well. So
sounds like chefs need to be as flexible and adaptable as farmers. They're like 2 sides of the same coin. Hannah, I wonder if you have any examples of the cost balancing act by institutions.
Yeah, I mean, as you're saying, I think menu is the key to it. And similarly, the challenge we've had when someone will try to just say, well, it will cost more because I'm not going to change anything about my menu and I'm just going to switch out a product. Yeah, it probably will cost more. And so I think the places where it's been successful, and universities where it's been successful, have been places where they've done really creative work around menus to accommodate, places where they have incorporated more from scratch cooking, being able to source local ingredients versus local prepared foods. Some institutions have found ways to use to get foods that aren't otherwise reaching the market. So like I remember an example of one university that discovered that there was a local farmers who were raising chickens for eggs, and they had very little market for their medium eggs. They were only able to sell their large eggs into grocery stores and markets. And so they actually could access their medium eggs very inexpensively, or working with, people that call like seconds or imperfect produce that wouldn't otherwise be able to get full price on the market. They have institutions have found ways to incorporate those into their menus, often at a lower cost. Sometimes we've had some interesting examples of universities actually shifting away from somewhat expensive conventional options like there was a university that had like fresh squeezed orange juice every single day. And they said, you know, maybe we don't need to be spending all of our money on fresh squeezed like oranges that we are importing from Florida, and instead put that money into like working with a local ice cream company that worked with youth in the city and sourced local dairy. They're amazing. Or, you know, changed out like kind of name brand products for conventional products if neither one had any, where neither one was local, neither one had values around sustainability or animal welfare or workers' rights. They said, okay, well, like let's go with the conventional option for the thing that's already not reflecting our values, so that we can put that money into the places that the products that we want to be able to be supporting. But I think the biggest piece is just the university or the dining program making a commitment to not pass on the cost to students and to not pass on to not try to cut costs with workers. And I think the places where the university has made that commitment, they have figured out how to do it. And the places where every time it's a navigation, or they'll come out and say, you know, we can only increase our local food spend if meal plans go up, and then, you know, students can't afford to pay that, or we're going to have to pay workers less or cut certain benefits that they have in order to cover those costs. That's never the way that we want to be, you know, supporting the local economy and bringing values-based food into institutions. And so really just having that commitment be the baseline creates all kind of like creative constraints for figuring out how to make costs work. And whenever that commitment has been there, chefs and dining managers and others have found ways to make it work.
That's a really perfect, yeah.
Sorry if I may. So what I mean, us Guelph, yeah, so like I said before, it's a predominantly agricultural university. One of the fortunate things for us is that we have a lot of breeding programs for a variety of different vegetables or a variety of different crops. So there are different crop stations in and around Ontario within a 100-kilometer radius. So typically when they have produce, when they do all these trial crops, and when they have crops coming out of certain farms and stuff like that, they usually, like, and we build some good relationships with all of them, and they usually reach out and say, hey, I got 5,000 pounds of beans, mixed beans, or, you know, it's a mix of 3 or 4 different beans. Can you use it? So it's just about taking the risk and say, hey, I'll get it because I got 5,000 pounds of beans for $0. So, you know, it really offsets a bunch of stuff that I would otherwise have to really factor in the cost. So I think all these costs, we get lots of carrots and onions and all this kind of stuff that comes from a different crop research stations. Sometimes they are charged, sometimes they charge us, sometimes they don't. So when you factor in all those big buys that you get in at a really low cost, I think it really offsets if I have to spend a few extra dollars on chicken or some other vegetables that I buy from a local farmer. So I think if you look at every individual transaction as being expensive, rather look at the big picture and how much impact it makes, I think it really, and it also is about telling the story. We do a little bit, but we're not at, we really have to do a lot of that. If you're not, I think we have to get better at it, like some of the universities that I've seen in the US, especially UMass with Ken Chung and all of them. We have a lot more work to do on that aspect. So.
Yeah, thank you. The piece that Hannah mentioned there and that Vijay added to about how who's paying the cost, I think that's a part of the conversation we want to shift into our April conversation as well about like the systems level opportunities and barriers for local food. So yeah, love that point. Last question, we'll do up to 5 minutes here, and then we're going to shift into a breakout group. And I think we'll just do about 18 minutes in one breakout group to dive deeper into some of these points. But the last question, which each of you have touched on probably throughout each question, is what activities do you do to engage students in the campus community? We were hearing a lot of that from Makayla about, and I was madly writing notes during her slides about food fairs in the fall and tours. I think Vijay, you mentioned tours in the kitchen and tours on the farm. So that's something that we're looking to learn a little bit more about. I'll just paste that in the chat, but really it's what are you doing to engage the campus community, students and faculty and staff? Go ahead, Vijay.
Yeah, so at Guelph, I'm sure UBC and the colleges have the same thing. We have something called the Hospitality Student Advisory Committee. So these are students who represent all the residences they stay in, and it also includes members from the Grad Student Association, the off-campus students, the diversity group, the university admin. So it's a group of about 30 different students and student groups whom we meet with every 2 weeks. They really are our voice and our connection to much of what we want to convey to our student population. We also have an ombudsperson who is kind of the really go-to person who conveys much of what we do to all across campus. So when we meet every 2 weeks, we do have presentations and information that we pass on to them that hopefully they do get across to our student body. Our department head and food service, he works very closely with the resident assistant. So it kind of starts off in the beginning of the year in August, middle of August, when we have the resident assistants camp, about 160 or 180 of them. I think we kind of really start connecting and we really tell them our story of where the food is from. The good thing is that middle of August is peak produce season, and so we can really showcase and highlight that we're getting locally right from, including as chefs, we have a small garden in one of the greenhouses that kind of I really started that about 7 years ago to really kind of get our cooks and apprentices to learn how long it takes to grow a carrot or how long it takes to grow a tomato, right? Typically, it comes out of a box, they chop an inch off each side and they really don't value anything at all. So I think, so when you start going around asking students or cooks or apprentices, hey, how long do you think it takes to grow or where do you think it comes from? They have no clue. So that's why we started our own garden and started, taking them over in March, start the seeding process, and involved a bunch of them, at least who had some interest to come in and plant and take care of the gardens and all that. So it started a little bit with educating our own group, which is very key, involving some of our managers as well, so that they all see the value in that. And it's very key that if you don't, I think if you have to, I think our group, like the hospitality group, our kitchens and servers have to really value that first before we can convey the story outside as well. So it's a struggle. It's not easy. And like I said, we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to do. And then and we started connecting with those stories over to the resident assistants when they come in the beginning of the year. It kind of, and then the student advisory committee. So it's a constant process of constantly trying to tell them, hey, this is local and this is what we do, and really try to convey to them as many stories as possible. And the other thing that we do is when we meet the students, the first meeting is always in the organic garden. So we take them on a tour. The gardener there, whom I work very closely with, we kind of have them walk through the farms. For lots of them, lots of them have not seen a pepper plant or a tomato plant and not seen how squash grows. It's an eye opener for a lot of them. I think if it takes, and that's kind of what we say, if it takes a 2% interest in food, I think we've done our bit in a way. So and every time we do our menus, we kind of try to tell them where things are from, and with student group, with university groups, we organize kitchen tours for them to come through and kind of really see what we do in our kitchens. The student advisory committee, we take some of our students to the auction as well to kind of really see, hey, this is where a lot of the vegetables come from, or we have a vegetable processing kitchen, really small space actually. That was kind of, we kind of set that up with a grant from the Ontario broader public sector local food procurement. So we got some money out of that. We set up a small veg room, really to process a lot of the idea was to process produce that we would buy locally. So things like that. So there are a lot of small connecting dots. And again, it's just small steps. And I think for all these things to succeed, I think we, even us in Guelph, I think we need to have a cultural change in people having, not just a few and not just telling the story. I think people should, we should get to a level where people know it automatically that, hey, I need to buy something local, or not just water refined. Really put value to what they buy, every single person. And that is what will make a difference. As of now, like I said, you're just barely scratching the surface.
Yeah, that's a good point. Creating citizens who are local food advocates. Yeah. How about you, Hannah? You probably have some great, lots of varied examples.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of engaging students, I should preface this by saying all of the places where institutions are doing amazing work around real food in the US was initiated by students. So the efforts that Makayla has been sharing about in Indiana were initiated by students and then have been kind of adopted and integrated into the institution. Same at UMass Amherst. And so I just also wanted that students, the way I think about it, students sometimes we might think of as like on the receiving end of needing to be educated and needing to be brought on board. And also, but in many cases, in my experience, it is actually students who are pushing the institution to adopt those values. And that has been a really powerful thing to see. And so sometimes it's really been students actually thinking about how do we engage other students in this, and sometimes it is students thinking about how do we engage the institution in this, the dining program in this, and then sometimes it's the dining program thinking about how do we engage students. So I think it goes in all kinds of directions, and depending on the campus and the where energy is among students and the willingness and who is present within the dining program, those dynamics can look dramatically different across the country. One framework that's been really powerful is this real food calculator tool, where students are actually doing the auditing, researching the campus food supply chain, sometimes actually helping to identify new potential sources, relationships with farmers and businesses, sometimes in intern roles or other staff roles, or as advocates within the university. Classes have actually gotten involved in those kinds of audits and research, so getting faculty involved and whole classes involved. I think the fair that Makayla shared about is a great example, and we've seen that in a number of different places, creating opportunities for students to meet some of the farmers and business owners behind what's coming to campus. Surveys can be a great tool to use to learn about what students are interested in, and to share about efforts. I think transparency around what's being sourced is really important, and labeling has been huge. And I think it's both very important to be labeling when there is food that is local or that has other values that students really appreciate and can learn from, and can learn who those producers are and support them, also outside of the dining halls, and also not over labeling, because that can break down trust when you have the same picture of the farmer on the salad bar, even when the ingredients have changed, and that can breed distrust or a sense of greenwashing happening. And so that's something we also want to be cautious of. One effort that I'll name that was started by a group of students at Fort Lewis College, which is out in Colorado, but has been adopted in a lot of different places, is this Vote Real effort, where they basically tabled in front of the dining halls with 3 options of potential products that they had researched and determined could be ones that the university started buying from. And they were like, okay, if we could either get like local tomatoes or local carrots or local onions, which one? Or like if we could get, humane beef or local dairy, actually like ask students to vote and get involved in helping to make the decisions about how the university is doing values-based food purchasing. And then they will get really excited when those products actually get sourced, and they had a part in making it happen. So that has been a really cool effort to see start there and then be replicated at other universities as well.
I love that. What did you call it?
They called it Vote Real.
Vote Real. That's a really great example. I love that. I think both points that you've both hit on here are affirming some of what we are thinking about and learning. Mary teaches an upper level food systems class, and so we've been able to engage them in conversations about the pilot project, and they have indicated, this is fantastic. We want to learn more. This is really important. We want to meet the farmers. More students need to know about what's going on campus. So these are really excellent examples that we can take into next year, where we're hoping to have direct student support to help grow local food champions on campus at UBCO. So these are wonderful. I think that we could probably just keep going with questions, but I do want to offer some breakout room time to dive deeper into the questions that are bubbling up for our participants. So I think at this point, we're going to take 18 minutes and we're just going to go into one breakout room session.
Liz, I do have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing that our numbers are dropping quite a bit. So would it be worthwhile just to stay in the same session, or do we want to move forward with breakout groups?
Yeah, 12. So if we go into break, maybe everyone can just put in the chat. Do you want to go into, we'll be in breakout rooms of about 8 people. So if you want to go into a breakout room, no, you're right. We have 12. We could just stay here and then we have access to both panelists and yeah. Okay, let's do that. Is everyone okay if we keep recording then? That's a good opportunity to have the full session recorded. Great. If you're comfortable and want to turn your cameras on here, that would be great. And definitely either plunk your questions in the chat or unmute, and we'll just do it like popcorn style. Just unmute and ask, or if the chat's more comfortable, that works too. We have a couple more questions that we can start with, but I want to give you guys an opportunity to jump in. Even comments too, like what's standing out for you at this point.
I have a question. I'm really encouraged by this conversation, which is around students kind of, driving this movement. And, it's something that we haven't really thought about with VBC. And I'm just curious if, anyone has any examples of, what's worked well, or just any ideas around, how you can support that at institutions.
And are you thinking too, like from a funding perspective as well, or just in general?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we haven't funded through VBC institutions directly, with the exception of this UBCO project. It is, we've done a lot of different ways and to support, whether it's information or a matchmaker, customized support in different ways, but not sort of in the mode of direct funding. And I'd be just curious to learn a little bit more around how that could look. Maybe that is something we could consider into the future, but it looks like Mary has an idea.
I know that we have an initiative here at UBCO coming from Campus Health, and students associated with that would really like to have a food hub. And I know the word hub gets way overused. In this case, what they mean by a food hub is like a place, a physical place on campus where people can come, perhaps do some cooking, perhaps have a garden, composting, education, and just a place for actually supporting education about the food system, about food. And if that kind of physical infrastructure and also maybe funding for a staff, you know, whether it's full or part-time, to kind of run programming out of that place, that would be like absolutely ideal. And that is something that they're working towards at UBCO, because that would definitely change the culture.
Great.
Okay. To talk about what Mary said, at Guelph, it's probably not directly related to what the question was. So just about student engagement and how students started a movement here in Guelph. We have like I said, we have an organic garden on campus just under 1 kilometer from the main kitchen. This in 2012 or 2013 is when one of our students who used to work in one of the cafes, she started taking the coffee grinds from the coffee shop and started taking it to the organic garden. It kind of really took off from there. And in 2016, 2017, and even till last year before COVID, we had an excellent composting program where all the green waste, it's from a small bin of coffee grounds from one of the coffee shops to composting close to 20,000 pounds of all green waste and all coffee grounds from across campus going into the organic garden. And all that produce coming back into the kitchens to go into meals served on campus. So it was a very successful, and it's still a successful story on campus. And the place also, there are lots of events that are held in the organic garden, and just kind of served as a space for people to kind of relate to this circular food movement and really get the story out across campus. So 2017, 2018, when this story really hit and lots of people across campus started taking note, it did make a big impact on campus about, and it kind of pushed our story as well about sourcing local. And I think we had lots more support and help from the senior administration as well for that cause, right? So it's just one of the things that, like I said, like Hannah mentioned, students started it and it's kind of grown from there. Again, there's a lot more to do, but this is just one example.
Yeah, those are great examples. Yeah, I think in terms of the funding question that came up, I think that having funded positions for students who have energy to take on these efforts can be really powerful, because not every student can be putting in the amount of time that it takes to really make the change that they might want to be making on campus if they're working multiple jobs, for example. And so it can make that leadership more accessible to folks who need those resources, and also create kind of some sustainability in efforts on campus. I think classes are a great incubator for ideas. I've seen professors lead classes where students will have a project where they explore food issues on campus and come up with ideas for what they could make happen, and then they take those projects beyond the class and continue it into the future. And also just like looking around at where there might be existing efforts on campus and beyond, whether that's, I don't know the landscape of student networks in Canada as well, but if there are student networks that already exist, or maybe like cultural groups on campus who are organized and would be interested in work around access to particular foods on campus. Yeah, I would almost guarantee that there are students among the thousands there who would be excited to take leadership around this if they if they know that it's there and they know that there's support. And the idea that Mary, I think you raised, of having a staff person, the staff can be amazing resources to students who have ideas but don't know where to start or how to navigate the institution to bring them to life. So having a staff, whether it's within a sustainability department or somewhere else, can be a great resource to students who have who want to take leadership around this.
I think it's worth mentioning in the work that we've done over the last year, and the fact that Mary's been teaching a food systems class. Renoir, who's been helping us directly with this work, is one of Mary's past students, and Will, who is here, is also one of Mary's students, who and then Ty, who Vijay connected with last summer, was a student who did some research for us in the start of this pilot project. Will is going to be doing some further research into values to help inform next steps of this project. And the other thing that we're looking to do this year is partner with ICER, who is looking to get funding for a work study student who can work directly on this pilot project into the next year, specifically to engage students on campus to start to build those local food champions on campus. So we're working in that direction, and this is all super helpful. And I'm sorry, I think we just lost Deb, who had a specific question. But maybe we want to get to that, unless there's any more questions about the student piece. There was a question about third-party food providers. And I know Hannah and Vijay, or Hannah specifically, mentioned a number of points there, like how things look different when you're working with third-party providers in terms of student engagement and the change that can be affected.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the US, I can't speak for the university landscape in Canada. Almost 80% of universities outsource their dining to one of three companies, Aramark, Sodexo, and Compass Group, which in the US, the subsidiaries that are most present on campus are Chartwells and Bon Appetit. And that can pose, well, there have been amazing real food efforts at campuses that are operated by those food service companies when students have really advocated for local and real food, values-based food purchasing on campus. There have also been a lot of challenges with that. The way that those outsourced relationships work, at least in the US, is that universities will often sign somewhere between 5 and 20-year contracts with the companies, and will agree to purchasing a certain percentage of their food from a list of preferred vendors that Sodexo or Aramark, for example, has. And those are other food companies that they have made deals with and are paying rebates to the company to make it onto those lists. And so that means that it's actually really challenging for a chef to buy off contract and to buy off of those lists, and can be, I'm seeing some nods here, maybe experienced or seen this, like their position can be based on meeting those quotas and compliance. And so in some cases, students have actually pushed to get language into contracts with food service companies to reduce those compliance numbers, or to say that part of the food service company serving that campus means offering local food and food that meets other values. In some cases, students have actually chosen to advocate to challenge contracts that the university has, and to push for the university to move into a self-operated dining model where they have control over their own purchasing and menus. And in some cases, they've been able to make a lot of progress around that food on campus, but often that's been specific to just one university. And so those changes might happen at one university that has Aramark or Sodexo that's particularly well resourced and that the company really wants to keep their contract with. But then that doesn't translate to the food that they're providing and the ways that they work with farmers at the hundreds of other institutions, both universities and hospitals and schools and prisons that they source from. And so, yeah, so some folks have chosen to really work within that model and have really supported, both like pushed the dining staff around to go as far as they can and have backed them up to push the company to go as far as they can. And in some cases have gone the direction of trying to move into a different model of self-operated dining entirely.
I don't know the extent to which like BC institutions are managing all those pieces, but I'm sure that will be, and we haven't been through this pilot, but I think that's probably a lot of helpful information that we'll share.
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, amongst our post-secondary institution partners with VBC, we probably the most are with Chartwell's through Compass Group. And, you know, so we actually have started some work together to see if we can help to support these joint interests around local across all of the institutions that are working in BC with Chartwell's, and, you know, strong leadership with SFU, and, you know, we're excited to see where it can go. I think, you know, the vision would be that, you know, they kind of lead this change, and, you know, some of the practices that you talked about, Hannah, about, you know, rebates and purchasing. And I think that there's just, you know, a fairly sort of honest lack of awareness around what's available in BC as well. I think it's sort of twofold. So, you know, anyway, we'll be happy to share back with this group on what we're able to do. But Hannah, if you have any specific examples of where there's been success and kind of what that's looked like. I've looked a little bit at Chartwell's website down in the US, and I know that it seems like there's some partnership work with some of the local farms and things, but one-off sort of pilots and things like that. But it'd be great if you have anything that you could share where you see some really leading work, or someone that we could actually connect with down there. Would be really great if you know of a particular institution that's really driven some change with food service operations. Be great.
Yeah, one example that I'll share is with Sodexo in Vermont. The University of Vermont made a commitment to real food and really has moved a lot of efforts forward on their campus. They had a contract with Sodexo, and when that contract came up, students were really involved in advocating for writing language into that contract to prioritize local and real food. And then Sodexo has a bit of a monopoly on institutions in Vermont in particular. And so they created this initiative called Vermont First that brought together many different you know, universities and schools and hospitals and other institutions that are contracted with Sodexo, and basically aggregated like purchasing across those institutions, or demand across those institutions, and built relationships with local farmers to then sell in those places. And so that isn't something that we've seen be adopted, you know, company-wide, but within regional like management systems that they have, we've seen change within one institution kind of be able to influence what's available to others who are in that same. In the US, often they're oriented by states or regions.
Who led that, Hannah? Was that initiative Vermont First led by a regional food system network, or was it led by an institution, or
a combination?
Sodexo?
It was. It's been led by. I mean, yeah, efforts within the University of Vermont, there's a food systems network in Vermont that's really involved with that, with building that out. There are food hubs that were involved in developing that. So I'm not sure who came up with it first or who instigated it. But yeah, if you take a look at that, I think the Vermont Farm to Plate Network is probably, if they're not behind it, then they're very involved with it and could share more about that effort.
That's feels like a great full circle ending point in a way, because Land to Table was ultimately created out of the farm to plate example out of Vermont, when a group of women from farming families came together many years ago and said, let's do that. So, and in a nutshell, that's how Land to Table was developed. So I think probably that is a great place to end our question discussions. I think there's a lot of ideas that have been sparked and planted here. I know for me, I was writing notes and I was highlighting and underlining certain things. There was some great student engagement activities that I think we're going to try and pull into this next year of local food procurement at UBCO. I really loved the conversation, and I know around the values, and I know probably Mary and Will and a few of us others will be digging into that a little bit deeper, but just the opportunities that embedded values have in transforming food systems for areas, not just institutions, not just for farmers, but in general. I think that's a really exciting conversation that I was making notes on. For us, local, we have to further define those values, but it's tended to mean really centering and supporting small to medium scale farmers. So the word community-based came up a couple of times that I think is more synonymous with that we'll probably dig deeper into. Vijay, I loved what you were sharing about starting with educating your team first, and growing that out. So maybe it's not just students, but it's also maybe that hospitality staff. I think that was a really good point. The student surveys and that transparency around labeling, there was some really good detail there that I pulled out. And then this idea about successful programs being those where the dining programs were making a commitment not to pass on costs to students. That was another one that I really honed in on. And like I mentioned, hopefully we can dig into some of those meaty questions in our next one. So I think before we say goodbye, I know we just have a small group left, but I would really love to hear, just as a final way to capture our thoughts as a group. Let me see, where did I have that question? What are your main takeaways? What really captured you today, maybe in a few words? If you want to just take a minute or two to put that in the chat, don't press enter yet, just maybe put a couple of words or a short sentence, what you're walking away with from today's conversation, and then I'll say go, and then everyone, I know there's not a lot of us left, but we'll press go. I'm going to do it too. Just give you a few minutes, a few more seconds there. Okay, is everyone ready? We're not as big as we were when we began, but I think it'll still be fun. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, go. The pieces connected to menu planning and building and flexibility. Yeah, that's a really good piece. Real food, New farm hub with the opportunity to purchase lots for schools and healthcare. Okay, Curtis, that's great. Flexibility, yeah, that was one. Everyone has a role to play. We're moving in the right direction. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate your time to be here. Like I said, this is the first in a series of 3 Learning Circle conversations. The next one we're tentatively planning for March 3rd. And that one will have a focus where today was the institutional perspective and focus. The next conversation we're hoping to focus in on aggregation and the distribution perspective. So that's maybe more the farmer, aggregator, distributor perspective, how we get that food to campus. So hearing from folks who are working on that side of things, either with institutions or with other organizations. So certainly for the group who, if you would like to receive information about that and potentially join that conversation, I'll invite you now to put your email address in the chat, and Renoir will collect those. But also we can share that information out with the group who registered for today's session so that you can see what's next. And then the final conversation will be in April around like those higher level systems, opportunities and barriers around local food procurement in institutions. Thank you, Hannah, for zooming in from Boston. Thank you, Vijay, for zooming in from Guelph. It really was such a pleasure to host folks from so far away. That is the best part about Zoom, especially when we spend all our days here now. It's nice to have it feel exciting in different ways. I think that's it. We'll be back in touch. We're going to stay on for a few more minutes. If anyone wants to stay in chat or ask more questions, you're certainly welcome to. But otherwise, you are free.